Welcome to Uncle Jimmy's podcast. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, listeners. I would just like to say, and to all my listeners across the great country, today my heart is full because we've got a truly special voice joining us on the show today. Please welcome George Fontes, the host of World Ablaze with George Fontes, the powerful podcast where he delivers unfiltered, no bullshit conversations about politics, geopolitics, and the tough issues that matter most. George doesn't chase clicks or echo chambers. He digs into the facts, compares data, brings on the sharp guests, and speaks with the clarity and courage that refuses to sugarcoat reality. In this day and age, when headlines scream division, social media turns neighbors into enemies, and the world feels like it's teetering on the edge of bigger conflicts, George's voice is desperately needed. He reminds us to stay grounded in truth, to question narratives from every side, and to remember our shared humanity, even when the passions run hot. George, brother, it's an honor and a privilege to have you here today. Welcome to the show. Thank you for bringing your fire and your wisdom to the table today. You ready for this?
That was a hell of a buildup. I hope I don't let you down here.
So, George, right, with everything unfolding in the Middle East right now, right, your perspective on World Ablaze feels especially vital, right? We're still grappling with the 2026 Iranian War, or as the White House likes to call it, right, a conflict.
Right.
You know, it erupted on February 28th. When the U.S. and Israel launched nearly 900 strikes in just 12 hours, targeting Iranian missile sites, air defense, nuclear facilities, and leadership, resulting in the death of Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, right? But nobody's worried about that. You know, I think he had to go, right?
I agree.
I'm not worshiping the Supreme Leader and saying he had to stay. I think he had to go, right? But I also think that, you know, there could have been other issues, right? That other ways of taking them out, right? Of maybe coming from inside their own country, right? Rising up and taking over.
That's a possibility.
You know?
That's been discussed. The problem being with Iran is it's very closed off and controlled, for one, and they heavily control communications. So combine that with getting any sympathizers to help out to where, for example, to get anybody infiltrated into Iran to be able to pull that off would be also very hard because the population that there is there now, if you're not IRGC, if you're not in some way part of the regime or serving under the regime, you have zero access to any outside communication that they won't give you, and or you also have no shot at getting any kind of weapons, right?
Yeah.
So they would be in constant danger. And the thing with Iran and the regime themselves, it's not that they just threaten the person; they threaten the family. They threaten to take everyone out. And they're very violent in how they do it. They do it in a way that's displayed publicly. Obviously, you've seen it. Everyone's seen them hanging people from cranes, etc. But you know, the simple fact of this whole thing, though, Jimmy, is what's people are shocked by it, but they don't realize this has been going on for 47 years since the regime took power in 1978, and actually,
True.
was going before that. They were trying to infiltrate Iran to take power for well over 50 years, as far as the Islamic regime was concerned. So we would love to see an uprising. I mean, I think if I'm going to be honest with you, I have no sympathy for the deaths in terms of what happened as it related to the regime. Okay.
Correct.
I feel for
Same
the
here.
people. I feel for the people. I think Trump said the right things. We do want to see them liberated, but we can't force liberation. It has to come from within. And the problem with that is we don't know who to trust, right? You have the resistance forces like the NCRI on the outside looking in, claiming, the political arm of MEK or MEK. And, realistically, they are a resistance force. They were ousted. They were forced out of Iran a long time ago. The problem is they would love to be in charge, right? They have the means to resist and fight back, but the Iranian people themselves, the older generation, have never forgot that they actually sided with Saddam Hussein when they were cast out of Iran. And so they were in Iraq. And then during that period in Iraq, that's when Saddam Hussein took them in and said, hey, you know what? I'll help you. I don't like the regime, either. And I'll weaponize you. I'll give you whatever you can. They took that deal. But unfortunately, when it came time during the Iraq-Iran war, they did kill other Iranian civilians in the process. And I think a lot of the older generation does not forget that. So they have a problem there, but they have made it also very clear that they are willing to work with anybody who's willing to resist and support them. And, you could take that however it however that comes across. But I think that they're basically saying, look, we're willing to help weaponize, do whatever we can. They do have people, or let's just say boots on the ground, right? They can get the information regardless of whether or not the internet is working, etc. So those guys are out there. Problem is, they're not effective because they themselves were never successful at infiltrating the regime either. Like I said, the
Yeah.
IRGC is too powerful. It's too much on lockdown. You have the Iranian army that looks out for the people themselves. So as much as they want to be in control, and they do not want Pahlavi, for example, Reza Pahlavi to be in control either, because they don't want a monarchy. But
Yeah.
aside from the
That was the Shah's son,
NCRA,
right?
yeah, the Shah's son, who was also exiled, yeah. And so the problem we have there is it's on lockdown. It's too hard to get in without a fight. It's too hard to get any support from any resistance within Iran because they just don't have the resources. So take where I'm going with this in this large circle is it's hard to do anything else. Like we could say, well, why didn't they just send in operational force like, let's say Delta Force, right? Highly trained. This is what they do. Them or even SEAL team. They just don't have the inroads to get in there. So the only thing they could do is what they had done, which was strategic strikes based on where they may be. They could have done it with drones. They didn't do that. So the 900 something bombs in 12 days. It's the old shock and awe, playbook, right?
Yeah.
Get in
The
there,
old
get it done
George Bush
fast,
way.
overwhelm them, get it done. And that's what happened. The thing that nobody wants to admit with Iran is they're really limping along. Okay, their military really is fairly decimated. They still have physical bodies, but their capability is just not there. Everybody would say, well, they can make 40,000 Shaheds drones a month. Well, no, they can't. They no longer have those facilities to where they can keep up with that demand. Their allies, the only allies they really have, Russia and China, and you can probably count North Korea, but we all know that Kim Jong over there is very opportunistic. So, he's
He's
on
just
the
pissed off
sidelines. So to
nobody's
speak.
attacking him.
That's exactly it. Yeah, you've seen that meme joke, right? Where he's sitting on the sidelines looking. I was like, hey, how come no one else invited me to the party, right? And
It's
that's
the best, right? And I say it all the time, right, George? And I don't sugarcoat it either, right? The true fact is why nothing happens to North Korea is because they have a
yeah,
nuclear
I'm
weapon.
with you on that. Well, we can get into that if you'd like. I have some theories on that for sure. But getting back to why they didn't, as you said, use a different option. I just don't think it was there. It really wasn't there. I think that the reality is, yeah, we can go to the school bombing. That was not right. Nobody can agree that that was right. And I don't think anybody should have made excuses for it. That was the one thing. And I'm going to tell you right now, I'm not an anti-Trumper. I'm not a hard right guy. I'm not a hard left guy. I try to stay in the middle as much as possible. But as far as Trump is concerned, I think that he and Hegseth, they did the wrong thing by not owning up to that mistake, instead of trying to play it off. They never should have done that, in my opinion. But regardless, the casualties in this war thus far, including children, if we take away the school children, it's very low considerably. Unfortunately, the children, they did die. So we can't make excuses for it. And I'm not going to, definitely not. But I have no sympathy for their leadership being wiped out. I mean, let's just be honest. I do not understand between you and I, Jimmy, why the Islamic regime has been tolerated to exist all of these years. And no one can give me a straight answer. I've interviewed many people. I've interviewed people from the intel community that actually work the area, people that can tell me things, some things they can't. I have my nephew's literally deployed out there right now. He is in the Strait of Hormuz. All right. He's a Marine. So he's on the ships. And so we do get a lot of conflicting information, like what we hear on social media and on podcasts. Honestly, I'm going to tell you right now, 90% of them don't know what the hell they're talking about. They really don't. So should we be in this war? Maybe if you ask that question, be honest, I don't think we should be in a war. But I also think that over 50 years of appeasement by our own presidents and not taking action is what got us here. Whether we like Trump or not, he did what had to be done. It's just we're always going to look at it from like, well, why is it in my timeline, right? Why now? But at some point, kicking that can down the road, eventually it's going to become something we're not going to be able to deal with. So yeah, it's one of those situations, Jimmy, is like you want to plot it on one end and on the other end, you're like, should we?
Yeah, you're sitting there scratching your head, right?
Exactly. And I think everybody's doing that, regardless of what your political affiliation is, I think.
Yeah. And I think one of the hottest things for a lot of people is, right, you look at you look at Iraq, right? You look at Iran, you look at Afghanistan, right? And you see these were endless wars, right? And
right.
Obviously, in Iraq, you take out Saddam Hussein, and I think, I think my frustrations with Trump, lies in the fact that, people forget it took Bush a year, right? When he went on this tour across the country, right? Laying out the roadmap of why we needed to go to Iraq and saying, the yellow powder and all that stuff, which ended up turning out to be false. But he laid the groundwork and he let the American people know why, right? If you ask the current administration now, right, they give you a new answer every day.
Yeah, they do.
That's frustrating for me. Just fucking be upfront and honest with us. Tell us, hey, this
Yeah.
is why we did it, right?
I
Just come
don't
out and
disagree
say,
with
hey,
that.
they're a threat to humanity, right? And for me, if they came out and they said, look, and for people listening to the podcast that really don't know Middle East, right, and what's going on, look, Iran is the #1 sponsor of terrorism worldwide, right? There's no denying that.
Confirmed. Yeah.
Exactly. And if you go off of that alone and say, look, this is what they're doing, this is what they've been doing for 50 plus years, right? And they're only creating more hardliners, right? And religious fanatics for the future, right? And people need to realize that it didn't have to be this way. Like you said, I think appeasement for 50 years, 40 something years of past presidents of doing it, right? And then Trump does what he thinks he has to, right? And people, it doesn't matter. I think whatever Trump does, right? Trump could give everyone $1 million tomorrow, and people be like, "It's what the fuck? I want $1.5 million," right?
Yeah. I think
You know
you're
what I
right.
mean? Yeah.
Yeah,
And I'm not a
definitely.
fan of Trump. I'm not a fan of Trump.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid to admit it, but I could go into my reasons why, and I have many reasons why. I just don't align with his politics, and we're gonna get into it later, right? About the political
Yeah.
rhetoric,
Yeah.
and that's coming from both sides, right? That's not just Republicans or Democrats; it's both
I
sides, right? And
I look
that's
at it this way. I like some stuff he does. I dislike some stuff he does. And I
yeah,
didn't complain. Well, I did complain. Let's just be honest. On my podcast, I did bring up some stuff when Biden was in charge and et cetera. But I got to be honest. I'm an American. I'm going to be like, my perspective is that's my president. Regardless, this is who we have. We got to do the best we can to navigate the policies. But my personal problem with Trump. Okay, since we kind of brought that up, is this: he's not presidential. I don't mind some of the actions he takes, especially with our foreign policy, but it's his mouth that's the problem. But we can argue that might be one of his tactics, because what it has done, even though we don't want a president to say half the shit he does, it is confusing the enemy, so to speak, right? And now we're in this
and
weird
scaring the shit
meme
out of them,
war.
probably too.
Yeah, we're in this weird meme war with Iran, so now you're looking at the information warfare side of it. So I think Trump's very good at engaging that. Regardless of how stupid he sounds to us, imagine if you were on the other side of possibly receiving these missiles, how you're thinking like, well, this guy's fucking crazy. Like, he might actually do it. You know what I'm saying? So that could be a strategy of his. I don't think he's a complete idiot, but I do think that he's a bit too unfiltered at times. Pick and choose your battles, right? What you said about Bush is very correct. He did go on a tour. He wanted the U.S. support. He wanted people to back him. I don't think Trump did that for the reason that he knows historically he's had leaks in his administration. I think he wanted to keep a lid on it and not let the cat out of the bag until it was like, okay, go time. Even people in the military were very, very tight-lipped. I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but there wasn't too many leaks from people in the military either. Usually these things kind of get out and get ahead of us, or ahead of what they're doing. And this time it wasn't the case. I think a lot of what was going on is to keep people off balance, keep people guessing so that he was able to take action. And I know that pissed a lot of people off. I know it did, because we're like, wait, we didn't vote for this. We didn't want this. Why are we doing this? And he's not giving anyone a straight answer. The real answer, nobody wants to accept. We have an evil regime that's fanatical, that is hell-bent on taking over the world, whether they say it or not. And there's both a kinetic way to do it militarily, or they're doing it through soft invasions. And we can talk about immigration if you want, but the reality is that is part of their tactic, soft invasion. And we've been seeing it in the UK. We see it in Ireland. We see it here. We've seen it in Italy. We've seen it everywhere happening. And the EU right now is finally, I don't know if this is confirmed. I have to dive into it, but I think they finally came together and they signed an agreement to like, okay, now we're going to start mass deporting these Middle Eastern immigrants because it's out of hand. And this isn't a racist thing. This isn't me not liking immigrants. It's just, we got to look at facts. I'm a data guy. So if there's a huge amount of people coming in that don't align with your culture, you don't got enough time to adjust and balance, right? That's just what it is. So there is an issue. So there's two ways that they're doing it. And the problem that we have is people are looking at this and they think someone like me is a racist, bigoted guy. No, it's more like, I'm sorry, but their version of practicing Islam. And I always say that because they're the extreme side. Okay. There's many people who practice Islam also say, well, the regime themselves don't really practice true Islam. They're using it as a way to control people, to keep them under subjugation, for example, and to turn them into fanatical individuals. And that's how they keep them under control, on their side, and able to do these heinous things that we don't like. But then you got the good people. Let's just be honest, that they're born. We're born into our lives, Jimmy. We don't know. Like, you were born where you're born. We ended up in America. We could have been Nigerian. We could have been anything. We don't know. And so they don't know you different. They're born a Muslim. To them, they're like, hey, I just want to live. I want to eat. I want to drink water, whatever. Trying to live a good life. And unfortunately, they're the ones caught in the middle. And we do have modern Muslims. And what I mean by that is they're not practicing this fanatical, version that the regime is, right? It'd be like my example is like if you and I, let's say we're Christians or Catholics, if you and I practiced the Old Testament, we'd be stoning people right now, right? But we're not doing that. So I hope that my point I'm trying to make is coming across. It's like I'm not trying to attack Islam itself, but what I am doing is not going to stand for the way that the Islamic regime has been using a religion, right, to fanaticize people and turn them against the West. And really, all it is about is them keeping power and control of the situation in the region and in the world. When they came into power, it's been nothing but strife in the Middle East ever since. Like I said, you got to look at the facts, you got to look at the timelines, and you got to look at the results of things, and that's just what it is. Whether you want to accept or not, this is what happened. That is what's happening.
So under the new leadership, right? And they say it's Khomeini's son, right? And we don't know because he hasn't been seen and he's supposedly in a coma, right? And to me, I think there's a big power vacuum going on in Iran right now
There
because
is.
we don't even truly know who's in charge, right? But whoever's in charge, right? They've kept the tensions alive, right? With continued rocket fires and threats, right? A fragile ceasefire is in place right now, broken with the help from Pakistan. And who would think, right? Pakistan would be, brokering a peace deal. And others around early April, right? It's been extended, but it's hanging on by a thread. Do you believe real diplomacy can take root here, or are we one misstep from reigniting?
There is no diplomacy, man. I'm just gonna be honest with you. And it's not the reason is because the regime doesn't want it. They're an authoritarian, theocratic regime, period. Theocracy meaning, again, talking about the extreme version of Islam as the backbone, and authoritarianism meaning they want full control of everything. They're a nation state where you can't even leave your country without threat of death, right? If you choose to try to not convert or either convert away from Islam, then there's threat of death. And again, their version of it. I just want to make that clear. So I don't think there's diplomacy. They don't want it. The only thing that's going to make them sign an agreement, and I don't even think they'll hold it up, is because they literally can't survive, right? And that is the only way they're going to come to the table. Right now, Moshtaba Khamenei, we don't even know where he is. They've already put out a mural out there, which people are speculating is showing that he himself is dead with his father. They were showing the deaths of the leaders.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if it's confirmed that's what that actually was, but people are saying it is because everybody that was on that mural, they were dead. So
They were dead, yeah.
yeah, and we haven't seen Moshtahab anyway. We hear that he's written these statements that have been read by other people, and regardless of how he looks, I mean, it's easy with technology to cover that up. He can do a Zoom, remote call to the world, whatever he has to do, but he's not doing it. He's not showing up. So the power vacuum, I would say it's more of a power struggle. It's not a vacuum,
Yeah.
so to speak. Islamic regime is still very much in control, or they want to remain so. And then you have the IRGC. So the IRGC is it's basically the strong arm, side of the Islamic regime. And what they really did is they're weaponized. They're like an elite military is what they are, and their whole focus was to uphold anything the Islamic regime wanted. The ideas, whatever policies, etc. But since this has been going on, it seems the IRGC has been making certain decisions and doing things without necessarily taking cue from the Islamic regime, right? The actual regime itself,
Yeah.
the head of the leadership. So I don't think there's a vacuum. I think what's going on is there's a slight power struggle because even when we're looking at the negotiations, they don't know who they're talking to. The last negotiation, one of the representatives wasn't even supposed to be there or speaking on behalf of Iran, but he was there.
Yeah, they said there was like a full friggin' 747 full of representatives from Iran, right? They didn't
Right.
know who was who.
They don't know who's in charge. And then everybody is not talking about the Iranian army. What's happening
Yeah.
with that? So you have these three factions. We don't know who's in charge. We don't know who has a lead here. They're covering
And who
up
has
for
the say?
Moshtaba Khamenei. We don't know where he is. We don't know what's going on. The IRGC is still doing what they're doing. And I think that Iran was on their heels from the get-go. And you could tell because they started just attacking even their Gulf state neighbors, et cetera, because in their mind, it's like, if you're not defending me, then you're against me. And
Yeah.
I don't think there's any deal to be made, unfortunately. I really don't.
Well,
And if they make one, it's
George, once
because
they start
they have
attacking
no
their
other
neighbors,
option.
it's more of like, as well, to me, it's like, hey, they know their time's coming to an end. So you know what? We're gonna friggin' take down everyone, as many as we can, right? And bomb these cities, my neighbors, right? Because
Yeah, it's a
they're
death
coming to get
rattle,
us,
man.
And,
Yep,
and,
I
and
think
I
it's
think the
a death
hardest
rattle.
thing for I think the hardest thing for a lot of people is to realize is, I had a young lady on from what the hell was her name? I can't think of her name, but she's a freedom fighter from the Iranian I forget what the hell the name of it was, but she was on and she was talking about how in January in the streets they were protesting, and there was between 20 and 30,000 people missing after those protests. They're going to be seen again, right? And you think, right? So you go out, you protest, right? Here in the streets in America, they've had the No Kings protest, right? You go out, everything's peaceful, quiet, everybody has their signs, you get to go home, right? You get to go home and you get to go to social media and say, hey, we did this today, right? In Iran, there's no going home. You may not make it home. Second of all, there's no internet. There's no social media. There's nothing, right? So we
I mean, they've
truly
been on
don't even
blackout since it
know.
started, right? Is that true?
Yeah,
They've been
since it
blackout.
started, yeah. Yeah, so we truly don't know unless you're in the intelligence community and you have people on the ground or boots on the ground, and the satellites as well that look down to see truly what's going on there, because we don't know. They could be killing their citizens right now as we speak.
They are actually. They've been executing people, what's crazy is this is how desperate they are for power and to keep people in line. Remember the Olympic wrestler? I forgot his name. He came back home to Iran, and just because he was part of those protests you were talking about, they executed him. Right?
Yeah.
They also executed, I might get this wrong. Oh, she was a soccer player, but there was another lady that was executed, a young girl, was like 20 something years old. Same thing, public hanging. They do not care. Like you got to understand, they're very two faced about everything. You know, it's like a whole sleight of hand for them. They're going to present one thing to you, they're going to play the victim card, right? Why are you attacking us? We never do anything. We're sitting here on our own. We're never directly involved. And sometimes they can claim that legitimately because, of course, as you know, they use these proxies to do their bidding, right? But everything comes from them as far as the money that's funding these proxy terrorist organizations and as far as the direction and what they do. So, what's the solution here, man? I don't know. Look, the only way to get rid of this situation right now is you got to let's just step into what you were kind of talking to me offline, right? We're talking about the Strait of Hormuz a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's
it's
the
coming up
next.
right now.
Yeah, that's the next step. That's the important thing, and we gotta. I think what people are not understanding about that is everybody or the world. Let's say the world, for example, the rest of the world's just looking at their pocketbook. I don't think the world has a stomach to do what needs to be done to get rid of the regime because as soon as it starts hitting your pocketbook, all of a sudden you become uncomfortable, and that's the problem we have with Western nations. We don't have the stomach to do what needs to be done. Right? We go so far, and we go, well, damn truck's getting expensive to fill. Maybe we should back off. Okay, you do that. You give these guys a few years to regroup, they come back even stronger. So the whole thing with this blockade is, I know it sounded funny because it's like Trump going, "Well, I'll blockade your blockade with my blockade," right? It's the whole like Uno reverse
Yeah.
card thing. It was kind of funny, but that's not what it was about. It was blockading the Iranian ports. So they were trying to keep traffic open. Okay, and I know this for a fact because again, I'll just say I know. I can't say everything, but they were trying to keep traffic open. Period. And they were basically blockading the people who were still choosing to do business with Iran. So the whole strategy, what people don't understand, I think you do though, but most people didn't understand is they just looked at Trump just playing, oh, you called me a bad name, now I call you one. You push me, I'll push you back. That's not what he was
Yeah.
doing. This was a strategic economic operation. We're using the military to choke off their money. That Karg Island holds 90% of all their oil. Their biggest customer is China that buys about 90% of that oil itself. Cutting that out cuts off the cash flow to the regime. The regime needs money
yeah.
to what? Operate. Why? Because that money funds 45% of their government. That money also is used to keep continuing funding their proxies. Okay. Who you haven't heard a lot from lately? Hamas. Why? They're not getting funding from Iran.
Yeah.
What can they do? The Houthis have been speaking up a little bit, but even they, it hasn't been too crazy. They had that little skirmish with Israel, which, I think Israel should have held back a while Trump was trying to get things done. But, what are you going to do? But yeah, if you noticed, ever since the money's gotten tight and what's been going on with the Operation Strait of Hormuz, you haven't seen or heard of a lot of these other proxies really stepping up and doing anything. So if you start connecting the dots, you understand what the play is here. What's horrible
Once you
is
start cutting off that cash flow, right, George?
that's what it comes down to. And sometimes it's just as simple as that. It really is. Infrastructure's in trouble, no money. But of course, you got the UK and the European nations crying about their pocketbooks and their oil, when realistically, you can get oil from other places. Understandably, it's cheaper to get it there because it's closer. But I mean, not just because we're the US, we overproduce. You have Canada. You have Mexico. Not that we want to give Russia more money, but, they did lifted sanctions on Russia and you could get it from Russia. India imports from Russia. So if you don't want to do business directly from Russia, you can buy it from India if you had to. There's other places to go. And the same thing with fertilizer. America. I think we're one of the top producers of fertilizer. So I'm just saying there are other solutions to these problems, but people are choosing not to do that. They're not looking for solutions for right now because unfortunately the rest of the world is willing to tolerate the evil for the sake of their pocketbooks and the easy access to petroleum products, which is ridiculous in my mind.
Yeah.
I might be wrong, but that's my opinion.
No, no, so true. So, George, right? One of the most immediate and global impacts from the war has been the crisis in the Strait of Hormuz, right? That critical choke point through which about 20% of the world's seaborne oil and a huge portion of liquefied natural gas normally flows.
Right.
Iran effectively closed or severely restricted it starting in March, using mines, speedboats, missiles, drones, and threats against vessels, which sent oil prices sky high, right? And stranded thousands of mariners and ships. The U.S. responded with its own blockade on Iranian ports beginning mid-April. And again, that's Iranian ports. That's not a
Yes.
blockade of the Strait itself, right? Which, again, I'm not a big fan of Trump, and I'll always say it, but people don't realize when the media likes to portray things, right? They tell you the Strait of Hormuz is closed. Trump has the blockade on the Strait itself. He's part to blame.
Yes.
It's not. It's again. That's why we have George on. We're letting people know, right, that are totally ignorant of the fact of what is going on, right? And they listen to CNN, Fox News. They listen to all the bullshit that's you're going to get the wrong news in the wrong reports from, and that's why we have you on. So in some of it are calling it a dual blockade, right? Shipping traffic plummeted dramatically with attacks reported on multiple vessels, and Iran even charging now high tolls for selective passage. What does Iran's use of the Strait as leverage reveal about asymmetric warfare in modern conflicts? And how long can this standoff realistically continue for all sides?
Well, what this reveals is exactly what asymmetrical warfare is, right? That means you're not playing from one front. You're not using one
Yeah.
tactic. And I'm going to stay on the Strait of Hormuz, but
Yep.
combined with what they're doing with what they're pulling with their information warfare, right? Like all the AI videos, the all the slop you see on
Lego
social
video.
media that yeah, a lot of people are buying all this up, right? They're just eating it up, and the same thing with the Lego videos. And we laugh at it, but it's also a very easy way to get into the message into your subconscious. It's going to stick with you, and you're going to keep thinking about it, and eventually you're going to go, well, maybe they might be onto something. So we can't ignore the behavioral conditioning that they're actually trying to do through social media on the
Yeah.
American people right now, or just
That's
the
part of
West.
modern warfare nowadays too, George.
Yeah, and so the Strait of Hormuz, the play is obviously they're trying to squeeze everybody, right? With this toll you're talking about. So what it was going to be was about $1 per barrel was the original if you're carrying oil. So you get about 2 million barrels of oil on one of these large tankers, a very large one. So that's where your $2 million figure comes from when it was reported earlier. But they're not sticking to just oil. They're also imposing tolls based on cargo. So if you're supposed to call ahead to them or email ahead, say what you're bringing in. So like if you're bringing in banana leaves or coffee, right? You let them know what it is, and then they'll assess a different fee based on that. So they actually have a different fee for the oil and a different fee that they make up on anything else that's going to be coming in. So it's not just directed at oil, okay? But all that is literally them saying this is my neighborhood, right? You don't do anything back here unless I give you the permission. That's what that is. And it's literally just, I mean, they're just trying to tell the world that we own the strait, and they don't own the strait. But like the Strait of Hormuz going obviously okay, so separates goes around next to Iran, then you got the other part that opens up goes by Hormuz or whatever over there. And so I think I pronounced that wrong. Anyway, you know what I mean. But there's two ways to get in. So the traffic though has been directed to go through the Iranian side. And then that's how you can do business and stay down there and get into the Karg Island. But, what also is, that's the Persian Gulf, right? So they don't own the Persian Gulf. And then you have Saudi Arabia, you have all the other nations there, Gulf nations that
Gulf
also
states,
are
yeah.
exporting products. So what's crazy to me is this. I'm getting a little off topic, but what's crazy to me is this. What Iran is doing is hurting all the Gulf states or the Gulf nations. And what I've seen in this whole conflict is why the other Gulf nations have done nothing themselves. Instead, they've called for Trump, literally, they have called for Trump to go in. I think it was Saudi Arabia that called for actual boots on the ground. It's like, you need to get in here with your troops and we need to get this handled. It's like, why don't you guys do it?
Yeah.
But we could also say that we started it, so whatever. I understand that. So the play here is they're letting everybody know they're in control. That's what the play is. That's really all it was. Can they hold out? No, because Well, even if they go in, okay, they can't get ships out. So if everybody who sends a vessel in can't get out of the ports, what's going to happen? Eventually, they're going to stop sending vessels. They're going to find other ways or other places to do business with. It's like a very like base level, simple tactic that Trump is trying to employ, but that is exactly what's going on here. I would love to give you like this crazy expanded explanation, but it really is. I think it's much simpler than most people are wanting to realize. It's really all this is. It's all coming off about choking the money. As far as the mines go, what was crazy about that is while the first negotiations were going on, Trump ordered the military, the Navy, they were already sweeping the mines while they were going through those negotiations during that 2 week ceasefire, I believe it was. So that was already done. So the waterways were open. They are now once again deploying mines, but I can tell you right now that our military is very successful in sweeping those up, and that recently the Navy has been boarding vessels that are not complying. So
Yeah.
this is not working in Iran's favor. I think they played the strongest card they had, and it's just not holding up in the long game here.
So last question on the Strait of Hormuz, right? Economically, that has already caused pain, right? Higher energy
Yeah.
costs, rippling worldwide, potential fertilizer and food supply disruptions, and billions in daily losses for Iran. President Trump has been clear about further action if the strait isn't safely reopened. Do you see a realistic path through ongoing talks in places like Pakistan, or is this becoming the war's most volatile flashpoint?
I think it's just a volatile flashpoint because,
Yeah.
like you said, they're losing money, right? I think they're losing like 13 billion a month or something like that, 480 something million dollars a day right now. That's the impact of this. Pakistan's interesting because they're not necessarily friends of the West, but then they're not friends of the West, right?
Yeah.
They always play this like walk the middle, so to speak. When push comes to shove, they're gonna look out for themselves. I think what they're doing is they know that Iran was the bigger, stronger nation, and of course there was things going on between Pakistan and Iran. And if you even go back, if you go back further, when the U.S. first started getting involved in the Middle East, like let's say Afghanistan and whatnot. Pakistan back then was also a broker, between the US and other things that were going on. They were the ones helping funnel the money to the resistance forces, right, to fight
Yeah.
against the Russians and whatnot. So we have this history with Pakistan trying to broker, but in my opinion, I don't think the US totally trusts them.
Trust them, yeah.
And no, and then the other side of this though is Pakistan is not, while they are a nuclear power, they know that their military in and of itself is not enough to deal with the onslaught of the US, for example. And so they have to be careful. And even though they have nuclear weapons, look, once one person starts firing it, it's bad for the whole world. And I think
Yeah.
they're sane enough to know that. They know that. I think most people with nuclear weapons know that it's just a deterrent. It's just a way of going, well, I'm going to push the button and just, okay, we'll back off, right? I don't think
Yeah.
anybody really wants to use them. Not really. Oh, maybe Kim Jong Un does, but I don't think anyone else does.
He's
So
just itching to use one.
I know he is. He's trying to prove that he's trying to prove he's part of the one of the big teams, right? So as far as the playing field goes, but I think Pakistan. Look, I'll just say this. I'm going to stop rambling. I'm just going to say this. I don't think this is going to go anywhere. This is either going to end up with the regime totally falling and collapsing, and they're going to fold and bend the knee to Trump's administration, or they're just going to get taken out. The linchpin to all this that we haven't discussed is whether or not Congress will extend the actions. That's going to be the
Yeah,
issue.
and I don't know, if they're going off the 60-day deadline or the 90-day deadline. I don't know
Right.
what they're going to use because we're coming up on the 60 days, which is I think any day now, right?
Yeah,
And
we're getting
they
close.
just came back into session today, so we'll have to see what they say.
I think
know?
that's what's going to determine how far this goes. I don't think it's Trump's resolve, for example. I think that it's going to come down to legalities and what Congress is going to do because you can't declare a war. Only Congress can, right? We know this.
Only
You
Congress.
can do operations, though. Okay. And, we've seen it happen time and time again under other administrations. We never really officially went to war. We just had extended operations. And Congress can approve to, say, yes, you can do that without declaring a war. And that distinction to the world is different. Like if we just said, okay, we're going to war with you, then now everyone's like, oh, wait a minute. Now everybody has to look out for their own interests, right? Because now you're officially declaring, no, we're going all in and we're taking these guys out. Versus in an operational position, it may just be that, I don't think Trump wants anyone of our people to die. He's always said that many times. He doesn't like casualties. He doesn't want to see the military, our military get hurt. He doesn't want to see anything like that happen. So I think what we're also seeing is while he could have pressed harder, he's kind of hesitant because I don't think he wants to see anyone die. He's hoping that just us being an overwhelming force is enough to turn the screws to the Iranian regime. Okay. And I think what he's doing, because you mentioned the 60-day mark, I think he was trying to hopefully get this done before we even have to come to Congress and go, hey, we're going to need that extension or that extra money to make this happen. I think he wanted to get this done before we even got to that point. But the problem's going to be if Congress fights him back, then we pull out and it's all for naught. What's the point then,
Yeah.
right? And then Iran
Yeah.
just builds themselves back up.
Yeah, because I think we have a true opportunity here, right? If the goal is to, make the regime go broke, right?
Yeah.
Penniless, right? With no money. You have the number one sponsor of worldwide terrorism going broke. That means a lot of the, like you said, the proxies go broke. They have to find their own ways for financial gain now. They have to find own ways to
Right.
figure it out for themselves, right? And I think it's powerful. I think there's ways that Trump can go to Congress, right, and make the pitch.
Yeah, he can make the pitch, but we just don't know if Congress will support him.
Well, I think right now the hottest part is, right, George, is that fucking excuse my language, I swear all the
No,
time,
that's
but
all
I get
good.
frustrated when it comes to this, right, is that both Republicans and Democrats, right, they have their heads, both parties, so far up their ass that they can't reach across the aisle and say, hey, this is what's right for America, right? This is what's
I
right for
think
America.
I think to your point, I don't think that anybody understands what's right for America in this conflict.
Yeah.
Look, the whole America First rhetoric, right, that was going on, during the elections, et cetera. I think we're tired. We saw the Gulf War. We saw, the Iraq War. We saw what it did, and it's like it just seemed like it went on forever. Right? Nobody wanted to get back into that bullshit. Nobody. And I understand the sentiment. I do. I get it. But we also can't keep turning a blind eye to the fact that, the regime has been behind most, not all, but most all the world's terror that has ever happened. And you have the sympathizers who are always like, Islam this, Islam that, I'm going to convert to Islam. And you're bigoted, whatever. Great. So why aren't we discussing the Nigerian Muslims killing all the Christians in
All the
Nigeria?
Christians, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Thousands. So my point with that, why I brought that up, Jimmy, why I brought Nigeria up, is because it's going back to what I said, or my statement anyway, as into why is the West tolerating an evil regime? Okay. Everyone's crying about how it's wrong to handle that situation. I haven't heard one country, one leader bring up what's going on in Nigeria. You know why no one cares? Because it's not hurting their pocketbook.
Exactly.
Period.
Yeah. And that's the hottest thing, right? Because you always hear it. America went to war in Iraq because there's oil, there's this,
Yeah.
we went to Venezuela because of oil, and it's, so George, we're going to shift gears, right? Closer to
Yeah.
home now. And
Yeah,
this
no
one
worries.
really hits the heart, right? And leaves a heavy feeling in the chest. Just a few nights ago, right? On April 25th, we witnessed something deeply disturbing at the White House Correspondents' Dinner, held at the Washington Hilton, right? A 31-year-old man from Torrance, California, who I refuse to say his name. He's a teacher, a tutor, a Caltech educated engineer, and amateur video game enthusiast. He rushed a Secret Service checkpoint in the hotel lobby armed with a shotgun, handgun, and knives. He exchanged gunfire with law enforcement. A Secret Service officer was hit, but thankfully saved by his bulletproof vest and is doing well. President Trump, First Lady Melania were quickly evacuated from the ballroom amid the chaos. Trump himself was pulled off stage just seconds after shots rang out. The event was ultimately canceled, and the suspect is now in custody. Reports indicate he sent a roughly 1,000-word manifesto to family members shortly before the attack, in which he expressed anger at Trump administration officials, referred to himself in dark terms like the friendly federal assassin, and included anti-Christian sentiments framing inaction against perceived oppression as complicity. He reportedly targeted administration figures and left a trail of troubling writings. George, what went through your mind when you first heard the news of this attempt unfolding? What should have been a night for the press and political figures to gather?
I think what I think is what I thought, the previous attempts. And I think this is all just a matter of the narratives that are being pushed that are, not, I won't even call it misinformation, deliberate disinformation into framing Trump as the devil, for example. And look, he may not be the best guy in the world, right? But he's not the ire, or the reason why everybody's feeling the way they are. If they would really just separate themselves from the bombardment of curated messages and all the AI slop that's out there on the internet and primarily social media like X and etc. People need to take a break. They need to take a breather, man. Step back.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to make excuses. Does the economy suck right now? Damn right it does. I mean, my business is taking a hit. I'll admit it. Trump's policies are not all perfect domestically, but it's not going to bring me to try to kill the damn president. I mean, that's just ridiculous. He's not doing anything that's really destroying America. What he's trying to do is bring it back to its glory days. And the way he thinks he's going to do that is by implementing very old policies we used to have before. But the world's evolved. I mean, we're too interconnected, in terms of commerce, economies. It's global. We can't be an isolationist state. And so if we're talking about things like the damn tariffs and stuff, there's two ways to look at that. Yeah, it hurts us, but at the same time, I think the play was trying to force people to realize, well, these goods are going to cost more from these countries, so you want to buy domestic. Problem is, we weren't set up for that. We weren't set up for that. We gave
Yeah.
away our manufacturing. Like, how was that going to happen? So I understand what he's trying to do, but these are the type of things that in the media they'd start to say, Trump did this, so that's why you can't afford to buy steak anymore. You can't afford gas anymore because Trump. Trump went ahead and broke all the international laws by swooping up, Maduro. Trump did, killed all the children in the school. It's always Trump this, Trump did this, Trump did that. Yeah, sure, Trump's an asshole. Let's just admit, he has that about him.
Yeah.
But the continued messaging of turning him into Hitler, which he isn't, and even that is very important. You got to look at the fact that if you look at Joseph Goebbels' example of what he did in 1930s Nazism, right? What he did with propaganda, he said it very plainly and clearly. You tell a lie enough, consistently enough, it becomes a truth. And that is the exact playbook we see in the media. And we can argue if it's Democrats, we can argue if it's Republicans. I think it's someone in the middle that's just going, nope, I want the world to go this way, right? And so those messages and that continued messaging has been curated. It's carefully, slowly dripped out to where now we're starting to accept it, where you see people frustrated and radicalized, and they're taking action because they feel that they don't have any other way that they can make their way in this world, that we see in front of us now. And so that's my thoughts when all this came down. It's like, this is a result of all the bullshit narratives that have been being pushed ever since Trump took office the first time in 2016. And I'm not saying he's a perfect person. Believe me, I'm not. Okay. But he is not the devil that they're making him out to be. Some of the things that happened were policies put in place from previous presidents. That includes Obama and it does include Biden. And then under Obama's, we could say, well, Bush did this, so this is why this is happening under Obama's, and we can go back to Clinton. Like, people don't understand there's always this overlap. There's always a reset. But again, I think Trump's mouth, one, he's not very presidential. I think that puts people in a state of panic because, like, oh shit, he just said that. Now we're going to get fucking wiped off the earth because, now the UK wants to bomb us, right? We know that's not the truth, but it's making everybody uneasy and they don't know how to deal with it, Jimmy. That's what's going on. That guy, that teacher never should have came from California on an Amtrak all the way over and gotten in that building, allegedly armed with a shotgun, a 38 pistol, and a bunch of knives. Like, how does that even happen? It kind of makes you wonder, was this an inside job? Like, how's he just rushed through like that? Didn't make any sense to me.
Yeah, it
and
makes
that
no
could be the
sense to me,
case.
right?
Yeah.
Because you think of it, right? Even as I was thinking of it in my head, like, okay, if he comes out of his room, right? They said he was staying there with the shotgun, right? You think that Secret Service would be like, all right, we got a guy on the 10th floor, which they said he was staying in.
Absolutely.
Just came out of his room with a shotgun, right? Let's make sure he doesn't get any further than the 10th floor.
I mean, you nail on the head right there. I mean, if you're in the hotel, how are you hiding a shotgun? I think they said it was a full size, right? It wasn't like a sawed off or anything like that.
Yeah, it
So
was
you
a
can just
full
hide
size,
under a coat.
Yeah.
And he didn't even have a coat on from what I saw in the video.
No, he had a t-shirt on. So, I mean, again, he comes running around that corner and it's like, again, he had to come down 10 flights, right? 10 flights of stairs, which they said he came down. So to me, I'm not a big conspiracy theorist, but there's sometimes some things that do happen that, we can't explain, right? And this is one of those. This is, I question things, but I don't sit here and say this is done by, but you can question things and it's okay. As long as you question them and you think about it, because, and then, you have so many people, social media, everybody now, I had to turn it off today because this was all set up. And it's like, nobody set anything up, and then the other thing, George, that troubles me is, so he's able to run through with the shotgun, right? They said he shot and hit the Secret Service agent. And then one of the Secret Service agents fires back 6 to 8 times, and this guy's not shot, right? Not killed, which usually happens, right? And
good point.
He's alive, right? So how does that happen, right?
That's a good point. I don't know. When this happened, I was this isn't my day job, right? So I had a gig. So I'm in concert production. So I had this big concert I was providing production for, and I'm here with the artist, and I'm hearing on the on the side talking to their manager, and all of a sudden I see this stuff coming through on my phone, and I'm like, "The hell's going on?" So, I didn't have enough time to really absorb everything that happened and really analyze it. But just going off the cuff here, right? As it was coming at me, just as it was coming at you, I heard some of the rhetoric, like this was staged, this was set up. I will say it was set up by someone, right? We're always going to think that there's no way a guy like this could have pulled this off, but we've also seen this happen before. Are people too relaxed? Are they too complacent? And then now you hear the talk online about we don't need the damn ballroom. This is not an excuse. Oh, everybody's in lockstep. Like it's not about the fucking ballroom. Like enough with the
Ballroom.
ballroom already. It's a fucking room. That's all it is. It's a room where you can gather. Does it not make sense for the White House to have their own large scale room they don't have to do off-site events with where they have more control? That's really what it's about. It doesn't matter if Trump's building it. It just makes sense, right?
And it
So
saves the taxpayers money too, George.
yeah, it just makes sense. That's all I'm
Think
saying.
about
And you're
what it
right. It does
costs.
save money.
Think about what it costs to get Trump out and about every time he goes out, right? Secret Service, whether it's Secret Service, DC Police, wherever he may be, right? The cost of that to the taxpayer, right? If you have
Absolutely.
a ballroom, right? If you have a ballroom, he doesn't have to leave.
Yeah, it's a large enough venue, and I think people are missing the point on this. It's like once it's done, it benefits every president.
All the future presidents, yeah.
It's not just about Trump. Look, this is his last term. He's one and done, and he knows it. So that's why some of the things you see out there, he may seem a little more, off kilter. He's done. That's it.
Yeah.
He's not coming back. But this whole
Yeah.
thing, leading back to what you're saying, like the talk and the rhetoric online about it. I mean, sure, we can get into conspiracy and say, he had help. This was an inside job by the Trump administration. They said the same thing about the last attempt. And I don't think that's the case. I think there's too much complacency. I think the Secret Service, they still have holes that they need to fill there. I think that all the outsourced security needs to be vetted, definitely needs to be vetted. Also, as you mentioned, you have all these Secret Service, traveling. They do the best they can to control the situation, but it's not their building. They're still people are still going to miss things. And as far as the assassination, like you said, we're not going to name them. We're not going to feed that. But, this person became radicalized through all the rhetoric and narratives that's been pushed for the last few years. It's just this buildup. Some people just snap, and I hate to say it because he was a teacher, but you do find that kind of speak in education. And I do
Yeah.
have firsthand knowledge of that. So I'm not just making it up or saying I hate teachers. I don't. It's just, it tends to, especially in higher education, it tends to happen there more. And so it's unfortunate, man. I think the guy just snapped and I think he got the wrong idea of things.
George, and people may forget, right, that in 1981, Washington Hilton was the, same place where Ronald Reagan was shot by England.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So you can also go back to it and draw comparisons of, again, for me, it's one of the hottest things to be able to, tie down a hotel, for the president. But you would think, right, every door would have somebody at it. You would have, the magtometers, whatever they're called, when you step in the front door, right? People that were at the event were saying that all they had to do was show a ticket and they walked right in, no list, no nothing.
I
You're
saw
talking
that.
about-
Yeah.
Yeah, you're talking about the president of the United States of America, the vice president, the speaker. So you have the top three people in the United States of America and his inner circle, which can, some of the people from his cabinet as well, right? And you just show a ticket to get in. Makes
Yeah,
no fucking sense.
I heard that same thing, and I'm like, that absolutely did make any sense. I think maybe, the only excuse I'm not making excuses for them, but the only excuse I would come up with would be those people were already vetted to be there before anyway. They've been to multiple
Yeah.
events. Maybe it was like, okay, you guys were already cleared. It's like TSA clearance. I'm sure you know
Yeah.
that better than I do. So that's probably the only thing I could think of. But even then, with everything that's going on, they should never have been that relaxed. Not
Yeah.
at all.
No doubt about it. So
I completely agree with you.
the manifesto, right, George, reportedly outlined grievances against the administration and a calculated intent to act. In your view, what role do online echo chambers, media narratives, and broader cultural tensions play in pushing someone from frustration, right, to violence like this?
Yeah, well, I think the response to you on that comes in your question and the word echo chamber, right? So look, there was a push to abandon legacy media because the public finally got to a point where saying, I don't know if I can trust them. This is literally if you get down the bottom, it's state-run media. That's what everybody says. So now they're looking at what they call independent news sources, etc. But the issue is when we're talking about social media, people want to feel good about what they believe in, or they want to have what they think, affirmed by others. And so that's the danger.
Yeah.
Whether, and with social media, the way it's designed with these algorithms, it will continue to feed you what you seem to be interested in. So
And
that's going to create this echo chamber, as you said, or this loop of information that it's hard to get out of, right? Because after a while, if all that's feeding you bad because you seem to be focused on the bad, that's hard on you mentally. I mean, it's going to break anyone down eventually. You're going to start questioning things. And I think some people just really are easily manipulated. And those that aren't easily manipulated, let's just be honest, if you're going to keep, putting your damn face in that phone and you're just going to live off the information that's being fed through social media, you're eventually going to break down as well. You're going to start to
yeah,
believe it all. And it's a
yeah,
hard thing. I had this discussion with somebody already on another show I was on, and I only bring that up because it's very relevant. The only way we can try to get ahead of this is we gotta understand that we gotta remove ourselves from social media, from the situation. What I do, and I don't expect everyone to do this, I really don't, but I'll use some AI technologies or whatever. So I'll use some OSINT type of intel, tactics, right? Meaning anyone can do this, Jimmy. Everybody. All OSINT is just it's just publicly made information. Like it's just gathering publicly made information. Anybody can gather. The problem we have is people are too busy. They want fast information and they want to move on. So I always say people live on the surface of information. They're gleaming the headline. They're like, oh shit, that's what happened, and that's what they believe. They walk away, they go on with their day. Because, in America, our society, we're trained to, like you were talking to me earlier offline, like work, right? I do the right thing. I'm going to do this. And we're always working our asses off. And we don't ever make time for ourselves to wind down and take things in. And so we got used to society where it's like, Starbucks on every corner, whatever. We got our phones, 30-second videos, like, and even a 3-second video on YouTube. No one's even watching the whole fucking thing. They're watching 15 seconds and then, oh, yeah, this guy's
yeah,
an asshole. You didn't even watch the whole thing. It's out of context. And so
yeah,
the problem we're having is the society we're in is hyper active and hyper focused on, I need a quick, I need a fast, I'm moving on. And so that combined with the algorithms that's going on social media, I think that is a huge contributing factor to why people feel the way they do right now. They're not giving themselves a mental break, and they're also not going deeper. They're not going beyond the headline. I'm going to go ahead, like this major situation we're talking about, correct? I haven't had time to do it yet, Jimmy. So I'm kind of just going off the cuff here as far as what I do
yeah.
know.
No
I don't know
problem at all.
enough about the shooting, but basically what I would do, and I already started doing this, I will just cast this wide net and I will get 50, maybe 100 sources. Okay. Using some AI technology. I'll get the summary and I'll just keep drilling down, drilling down, drilling down. Once I'm able to corroborate all of those sources, if they eventually all start lining up to a degree, then okay, I know, A plus B equals C. I know this is correct. And that can start filtering out the bullshit because there is so much noise out there, man. It's just hard for anybody to focus. So I don't know how we change this either. How do we turn it off? That's the problem that we're in right
Yeah,
now.
it's tough.
The wheels are already spinning too fast, man. We got no brakes, and we're going off the cliff, unfortunately. As far as a society. But
Yeah,
to answer your
George,
question, I believe it
sorry,
is a huge.
and I know we
contributing
had talked
factor.
about it, right? And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, right? But it doesn't help that Palantir, right, is part owner of Facebook and
Yeah, I'm gonna laugh because I know someone who actually works for them, and the reason I laugh is because I think there's a misconception about Palantir and what they do.
yeah,
They themselves are not actively going out and going after us, right? The technologies that they create are being contracted. And the way it all started is it's really through military contracts was what they really do. There are some technologies that are being adopted by these social media platforms, for example, but it's not like Palantir themselves is waking up and they're going, okay, now it's time to fuck everyone over and get all their information. That's not what they're doing. Their technologies are being used by these other companies and organizations, and that's what's happening. And yeah, it sucks, but it's not Palantir actively going out there themselves and, going after us or the general public.
us.
So I
Yeah.
just want to say that, and I'm not defending them. I just know what I know so far, from that side of it. And that's another example, right, of what we are getting fed through the media because
Yeah.
more than one outlet is telling us that, are they not? So after
Oh,
a
no,
while,
they're
you're like,
wrong.
okay, well, that's what's happening. Damn, screw Planter. But,
Yeah, yeah.
and I get it. It happens. I understand.
JD Palantir, as I like to call him.
But yeah, basically, answering your question, man, yeah, it's a huge contributing factor. Everything that's going on, echo chambers, social media, it's just we get stuck in this loop. It wears on you mentally, and we don't give ourselves enough breather because we're just trying to keep our heads above water right now, especially this year. It's tough financially for people.
Yeah.
The
Yeah, George,
jobs
I don't
aren't
know
out
how
there.
you do it. Right, I don't know how you do it, but I've adopted a way with social media, right? Only for my podcast now, right? I used to
Right.
use it all the time, right? I used to use it and scroll it and Facebook and check up on people and see everything and watch videos and at the end of the night be in bed laying down watching. Next thing I know, I lay down at 11 o'clock and it's 2 a.m. because I've scrolled for 3 hours and I'm well, I started using it, right, just for the podcast, just for clips, just for reaching out to people, talking
Yes.
to people, right, and using it from a business standpoint. I love it because I'm not tied into, hey, what's so and so up to, or what's this one doing now? Or hey, let me watch this video, right? I'm not gonna lie, I do sometimes. We'll click on and watch, a couple videos, right, but not
Cat
like I
videos.
used to. Not like I used to, right? And I used to be so tied into it that it was like, hey, and you can see on the iPhone, right? It will show you like your social media usage for the day. And when I tell you mine was friggin' sky high, now it's because I do it all through scheduling now my clips and all that and putting it out. And the one thing I do use it for mostly is getting back to people that respond on on one of the clips that I put up for the podcast and all that.
Right.
That's it, because it can be used. You can, like you said, the algorithms and all that, it has like if I put up a political clip, right? Next thing you know, it's just feeding through my timeline, right? And look, I go to DC enough and have to deal with it that I know the bullshit that goes down in DC. So I don't need a fake AI video telling me what it's like, right? So
Yeah.
George, looking at the
Understood.
bigger picture, right? How do moments like this, where a public event attended by the president turns chaotic, reflect the dangerous temperature of our national discourse right now? Are we seeing the consequences of years of heightened polarization playing out in real physical ways?
Yeah, that's exactly what we're seeing, Jimmy. That is exactly what we're seeing. We kind of touched on it, but if we're discussing new media, right? I think these over sensationalized podcasters, right? The podcast
Yeah,
bros and all these, debate me bro people who really have no real grasp or concept of what's really happening. I mean, like, you're in DC all the time, so you understand what's really going on beyond. Very sure you're shaking your head at some of these guys when they talk. You have to be. I
no
do.
doubt about it.
And I'll just tell you the truth. They're speaking out their ass. They don't know what they're talking about. You have guys like, I don't, can I name anybody is that okay on the show or whatnot? Because it's just my
Yeah, you can
opinion.
name whoever you want.
Okay. I don't want to put your show on the spot, but
No,
you got guys like Dave Smith who don't know what the fuck he's talking about. He just doesn't. I'm sorry. He just doesn't. Okay. You have, Scott Horton, who gets all of his information and cherry picks all of his information from history to say that basically the U.S. is a terrorist organization. Without the U.S., there wouldn't be terrorism in the world. Well, that's all bullshit too. And I can go over all of that with you at some time, another podcast, and we can just dissect that. And and you got Tucker, who's back and forth. And look, Tucker's talented. He's smarter than he's coming off. But then you start to question, like, well, where's the pivot? Where's the shift? And it seems like all of a sudden everybody's doing the same thing. And if you're standing, if you step back, you can start to understand they're just seeing the winds of change and they're just trying to stay relevant and keep the money coming in.
exactly.
If you have any real integrity, you wouldn't be shifting your position every way the social media winds blow. You just
Yeah,
wouldn't.
yeah,
And I think there's some responsibility there, and then gets into another conversation about should we be regulating podcasters? Well, I don't want to be regulated. I know you don't, but at the same time, is there going to be consequences for misinformation? Misinformation is a bit of a mistake, right? It's a misunderstanding in the way that you hear the story and then you regurgitate it. And then there's disinformation where it's intentional. And some of
intentionally.
these guys, it is disinformation. It's
Yeah,
like Candace Owens, right? Always has a solution, always knows what's happening. I found the smoking gun. I'll tell you next week, though. You got to fucking tune in. Okay, cool. If you knew all this, why aren't you going to the authorities if you care so much? Because you don't know anything. Shut the fuck up, right? So,
stringing people along.
yeah. And so I think people, though, unfortunately, they get hooked. Like she's writing a real life Nancy Drew novel right now for everybody to interact with. And people are buying it and they're believing it. And it's not because
Yeah,
I don't think people are stupid, by the way. I hope I'm not coming across that way. I just think we're moving too fast. We're living too fast. And I think people want to believe that people like Candace, for example, or even me or you, they want to believe that we're doing what we're supposed to be doing and giving them the information, being truthful, because we're behind the mic. They're like, well, why would you be lying to me?
yeah,
And I think that's the problem. I don't think
that's the
people are
problem. Yeah, yeah,
intentionally. Yeah, I think they're just wanting to believe that they're being told the truth.
yeah. George, I'm not gonna lie. The first like two or three, when after the Charlie Kirk thing, I did listen to Candace Owens because I was intrigued, right? I was like, oh, let me hear what she has to say.
Of course.
After about the third one, I was just like, she's just grabbing at every string, right? And I chalked this up, and I don't mean this, and it's not coming off in a bad way, right? But, her and Charlie Kirk were friends, right? And it must have been tough to see that, right? Play out on everyone's phone, the world to see, right?
Yeah,
Him
absolutely.
killed. And for her, right, I think, and I can't speak for her, but just to take a step back, take a couple weeks off, but don't jump down that rabbit hole of conspiracy after conspiracy. And then, like, I was reading one way she was talking about Erica Kirk, and it's just like, leave her alone, right? She's going through it. She lost her husband, the father of her kids. She's going through it, right? And that whole thing's turned into a conspiracy theory, and it's like, this is what happens when, and I'm just like, we just can't take a story now and say, hey, this is what happened, right? You're allowed to question things, no doubt about
Absolutely.
it. If you question it, though, look at the reliable sources online. Do your independent research. Don't go to CNN. Don't go to Fox News. Don't go to crazy podcasters that just want to get clicks and people listen, right? And that's why I love listening to you, George, because you tell it how it is. Right?
I appreciate that. I try to. I'm not always right either. I'll be honest.
That's the best way, right? That's the best way. Like me, I have a mental health podcast on Mondays, Mental Health Mondays, and I say it to people, I'm not a medical expert, right? This is just from lived experience, right? And if you are having issues, call, 988 or seek professional help. This isn't in lieu of your therapy session, right? Go to your therapist still, right? But when it comes to politics and it comes to, I love getting behind the mic and interviewing people because, and I can sit here, right? We're going on over an hour, right? Some people, right? I can sit there and after 20 minutes, I'm like, this ain't going to work, right?
You checked out.
I'm formulating the exit plan, right? And I'm like, yep.
Hear that?
Off,
Been there.
Off exit here, right? And I don't like this person because I can see right through them. But when I have people like you, right? Authentic, truly yourself, right? And just having a great conversation. It's one of those where it's like, this is what podcasting's about.
That's what it's supposed to be about, man. And we should be able to, regardless of our political affiliation or how we side, we should still be able to talk about these damn issues, man, without yelling at each other.
Yeah.
And, same thing with me, Jimmy. On my show, I interview people that I know fundamentally don't agree with me, but I'm going to shut my mouth and listen because you know what? I want to hear their side. And worst case is, oh my God, I learned something, right? We walk away learning something we didn't know before. And I'm not here to change anybody fundamentally, but at the same time, look, let's talk about it. Let's hash these things out. That's what it used to be about. That's the way, we used to handle things. And now
that's what democracy is.
Yeah. And now it's just so much hatred, man.
So much hatred, right? And he who shouts loudest is the winner, everyone thinks, right?
And that's unfortunate. And that's not a debate.
That's not a debate, right?
The yelling match is not a debate. Making fun of someone or, clowning on them and embarrassing them is not winning a debate, man. You didn't prove a point. Look, I appreciate you inviting me on. Look, here's the thing. I love talking about the stuff, and I'll talk about anything else if you want. I don't just have these blinders on in politics, but at the same time, I'll do the best to ever answer you correctly. I'll give it to you straight. And I've always said, sometimes we get things wrong. Even my intel buddies, they're like, hey, we gave the assessment based on the information available at the time. Things develop. And then there's times where I'm like, yeah, well, you got that wrong.
Yeah.
And it happens. It happens. Things evolve.
So, we have to turn down, right, the political rhetoric, George, and it has to come from all sides. Without exceptions, right, or finger pointing, whether it's coming from the left, calling opponents threats to democracy and fascists, or from the right, labeling the press and critics as enemies of the people and deep state traitors. This kind of dehumanizing language positions poisons the well, right? It creates a toxic climate where unstable or deeply angry individuals can find twisted permission or justification for violence. Words aren't just words when they're repeated relentlessly on cable news, social media, podcasts, and campaign trails. They shape the air we all breathe. They erode trust, widen divides, and make it easier for someone like the suspect to see fellow Americans not as people with different views, but as enemies worthy of targeting, right? We need leaders, media figures, influencers, and everyday citizens on every side of the aisle to model something better. Disagree passionately, but without dehumanizing. Challenge ideas rigorously, but affirm the humanity of the person holding them. Call out bad faith or extremism wherever it appears, left, right, or center, without excusing it when it comes from your team. Because when rhetoric escalates into constant siege mentality, or apocalyptic framing, it doesn't just win arguments, it risks real lives, real families, and the fragile fabric holding this country together. George, how can we practically start lowering the temperature in our conversations, our feeds, our communities, and our leadership? And what would real de-escalation look like from all sides? And why is it so urgent right now?
Yeah, that's a multi-part answer for sure because there's a lot of nuance in that. So
A lot of moving parts.
if we're talking about politics, I think the reality is it's almost like two sides of the same coin, honestly. If they hated each other so much, they wouldn't even be working together. They wouldn't even be in the same building. I think there's a lot of bullshit there. And there are people who don't like each other, but that's like a personal thing. And I know you know this because again, you do a lot of work yourself, right? So I think people got to realize that stop putting all your trust in these politicians and taking them for face value. Okay. You got to learn to read between the lines of what's going on. And the only way we're going to lower the temperature is by not relying and solely buying into what they are saying. What's going to happen is we need to do what we're doing. We got to ourselves not want to be right all the time. Okay. You can't have a conversation if you're going to come in, closed off to other ideas or perspectives. So we got to stop trying to prove who's right in a situation. We can talk about it. You and I can talk about it. Anybody can. You got to be able to not be afraid to actually socialize again, which is something we lost ever since, social media came to be. So we have to discuss these situations openly, but we got to do so without having fear of losing our job or losing customers or being ostracized from, certain communities because all of a sudden you voted for Trump or, oh, you voted for Biden or whatever. Like that's bullshit. That's bullshit. We should be able to accept all of our differences and accept each other. And we should be able to have these conversations. We should be able to learn from each other. Listen, it's a hot topic I don't want to get into, but if you believe in abortion and I don't, for example, hey, let's leave it there. We're not going to agree. Okay. But it doesn't mean you and I can't break bread and work together and do everything else. It's just, we know there's some things that, hey, we just don't go there. I understand it. Some people feel strongly about certain things, but the reality is we live in the gray. It's not a black and white world. It is a gray world. Okay. There's a mixture on both sides. And I think a lot of people forget that. They just think that it's my way or the highway mentality. I'm right. You're wrong. Bad, good, left is good, right is evil, or reverse, whatever, and we could blame the left for, the rhetoric in the media, which I'm just going to say that they had control of the media. So yeah, they did do that. But at the right, were a bunch of stubborn jackasses too, that were kind of like on the verge of creating a, Handmaid's Tale situation people were scared about. Right. So, it goes both ways. We just need to learn to meet in the middle like we used to do years ago and realize, hey, we all got to live on this earth, this continent, period. This America's for everybody. Okay. So we got to find a middle ground, a common ground that we could all be successful and live valid, meaningful lives in. So I hope that answers your question, but basically we got to remove ourselves from the politics sometimes. And we got to stop, buying into everything they're saying. Look, these people are not above you or I. They're not. They're not infallible. They're not Superman. They're not Superwoman. They're just individuals, don't even know what they're fucking doing half the time. They're trying to figure it out as they go. How many times have we seen someone in Congress try to call out an action by the administration and they themselves don't even know what it means constitutionally, like the actual laws? Happens all the time. It's like, how did you not know that? You're in Congress, you know? So that's my answer.
Yeah.
I hope that was a good answer for you.
So George, from the bottom of my heart, thank you, right? Thank you for stepping into the fire with us today, for sharing your unfiltered truth, your steady wisdom, and that rare ability to cut through the smoke and help us see clearly. In a world that often feels ablaze with anger and confusion, your voice is like a beacon, reminding us that reason, facts, and humanity can still win the day. You've given our listeners something real to hold on to, something worth reflecting on long after this episode ends. I am truly grateful, brother. Folks, listening right now, my family, my community, if George's words stirred something in you, reach out to him. Share this episode far and wide, and keep seeking out conversations that challenge and unite rather than divide. And here's my passionate call to action from the depths of my soul. Let's turn down the heat together, starting today. Reach across the divide in your own life. Have one real conversation with someone you disagree with, not to win, but to listen and understand. Speak with kindness, even when your blood is boiling. Support leaders and voices that build bridges instead of burning them. Reject the dehumanizing rhetoric that leads to checkpoints being rushed and lives put at risk. We are all in this together, Americans. Humans, parents, dreamers, trying to raise families and find peace in a complicated world. If each of us commits to one small act of decency and truth-seeking every day, we can lower the temperature, heal our discourse, and create real space for solutions on Iran, on energy, on safety at home, and on the future we all want for our kids and for ourselves. Stay curious, stay compassionate, everybody. Hold on to each other close and refuse to let fear or hate have the last word. God bless you all. God bless this country, and I'll see you next time on Uncle Jimmy's podcast. Take care of one another out there. I love you guys. And George, thank you so much, my friend, for joining us.
Yeah, man, I appreciate it, Jimmy. Thank you, sir.